Wait. What the fuck is this? Is this French? I can't fucking read French.
All right, hey, what's up, everybody? I promised you some content, and this is in no way the kind of content you would probably imagine to get, but it's content relevant to video games, and with the new console generation right around the corner, I wanted to talk about this. So, buying a PS5 or Xbox next, buy stock instead. With new systems coming out this year, you're probably going to be considering an upgrade to your current generation systems, whether you have a PS4 or an Xbox One or both. But what if you invested that money in the stock market instead? Specifically, what if you invested that money into each of those consoles' respective companies instead? So it's important to understand that it's impossible to know where the market's going to go, especially these days. But we can take a look at the data from the current generation, being the PS4 and Xbox One, and their respective companies' stock price from launch day to September 4th, 2020, and we can look at the growth of the value per share of the stocks and make an assumption that maybe it's best to, instead of buying a system on launch day, invest that money into the stock market. Okay, so let's take a look at the PlayStation 4 first. On November 11th, 2013, which was the launch day of PS4, the PlayStation 4 launched for a retail price of $399.99, and that's in the United States. We're dealing with the United States numbers, FYI. The Sony stock closing price on that day was $18.50. The Sony stock closing price, September 4th, 2020, was $77.66. Now, with a launch price of $399.99, if you had instead invested that into Sony stock on November 11th, 2013, you would have been able to purchase 21 shares of Sony. And that's rounded down because I don't want to deal with fractional shares. That's weird. Let's just keep the math simple. Okay? 21 total shares of Sony stock. Now, if you still owned those 21 shares as of last Friday at closing, each of those shares would have been worth $77.66. Okay? So the total value would have been $1,630.86. That's greater than 400% return on your investment. And by the way, I'm getting this data from finance.yahoo.com. You can put in whatever stock ticker you want and go to historical data and create a time period criteria and get all these numbers. You can look at open, highs, and lows, but for the sake of this discussion, we're talking about the closing values on those days. Okay, so then let's take a look at Xbox One. All right? Xbox One released on November 22nd of 2013 with a launch price of $499.99. Okay, their stock closing price on that day was $37.57 per share. If you had instead invested the total cost of a system into their shares, again rounded down, you would have been able to purchase 13 shares of Microsoft. Okay, and if you'd continue to hold on to those shares until last Friday, September 4th, 2020, each of those shares at closing price being $214.25, the total value of all those shares you purchased back in 2013 would be worth $2,785.25. That is greater than 500% return on your investment. Okay, so when considering these purchases of whether it's $400 or $500, consider the investment into the stocks instead and the growth of your money over time. As much as I love my PlayStation 4, and I don't have an Xbox One, as much as I love my PlayStation 4, and all my systems for that matter, their monetary value more than likely does not go up. Certainly not 400 to 500%, depending on which one you're comparing it to. Over time, systems will inevitably decline in value, whether they're used or buying new ones. And then you've got the rare exceptions when a system or console becomes a collectible, but that's typically special editions. Anyway, getting off track. So let's take a look at another example, which is the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is not necessarily last generation, and I think Nintendo has definitely separated itself from the pack insofar as competing with the current generation, but still they're worth looking at too, in for the sake of this argument. Okay, so the Nintendo Switch released March 3rd, 2017, at a retail price of $299.99. Nintendo's stock closing price on March 3rd, 2017 was $26.04. On September 4th, 2020, it was $70.68. So if you'd invested $299.99, rounded down, into Nintendo on March 3rd at $26.04, you would have ended up with 11 shares. Okay? Again, rounded down. If you'd held on to those shares up until last Friday at the closing price of $70.68, the total value would have been $777.48. That's greater than 200% return on your investment. So again, we've got 3 examples now of a company and its respective hardware on which you have a decision to buy it on launch day, or take that money and invest it in the company itself and let your money work for you. And over a course of 7 years in the case of PS4 and Xbox One, you can see growth of 400 to 500% respectively. And in the case of Nintendo, in just 2 years, growth of 200% return on your investment. It's really something to consider. The new systems are coming out, and while we don't know the prices yet, unfortunately it's kind of weird. Both Sony and Microsoft are in a bit of a Mexican standoff insofar as they don't want to reveal their prices yet. That's what we're all speculating is the reason that we haven't heard prices yet on the systems. In my opinion, Microsoft has the upper hand on this. I think they have far more assets to work with than Sony does. So Sony definitely, PlayStation is their number one brand without a doubt. So the price is going to be really, really important. But regardless, whatever the price is, it's worth considering, instead of buying a console on day one, to take that money, invest it into the stock market, even if it's just into that company, and see where your money goes in the next 2 to 3 to 7 years, based on last generation's numbers that, in all 3 cases I just described, went up dramatically. So again, worth taking a look at. It's something that's always interested me. Back in high school, I had an economics class, and they had us do make-believe stock market interaction. And of course, at the time, being involved with or being interested in video games as much as I was, of course, I went and looked up Sony. And at the time, Microsoft wasn't a thing, but Sony and Nintendo. There may have been a couple others, but you know, it was Plato economics back then. But at the time, I remember looking at an article, and there was someone a long time ago, and I've always tried to track down that article. But the person being interviewed said, next time you're thinking about purchasing a console, purchase stock instead. And if you know anything about the stock market, is that it's always gone up. Always gone up. There's always going to be day one adopters, and that's great because you want the product to survive long enough for you to buy it. But in the long term, for your personal finances, it's probably better to put off that purchase, wait for the retail price to come down so you can score a deal. In the meantime, have invested that same amount that you would have invested into a console into the stock market, and then you could pull from your account and purchase that declining valued console down the road. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you're planning on buying a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Next. Since we don't know what the prices are on either of the systems at this point, let me know what price would be too high to purchase those systems. PS3, if I remember correctly, was $500 to $600 depending on the model. Xbox 360 was, I believe, $300 to $400 depending on the model. And that's when we saw a shift in the gaming market. Microsoft took over, and then we saw it flip again with PS4 and Xbox One. Right? So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if this is way too much of an adult approach. When I was younger, I probably would have totally given myself the finger on this and gone for the instant gratification of purchasing a system if I wanted it on day one. But I think it's very, very, very important to consider your money and your return on money over time instead of possibly buying a system right away, right out the gate. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.